Good evening, everybody. Tonight we have a very exciting episode. We are going to talk to, we're waiting on Rip to get into the studio. Couple of quick announcements while we're working on that. Number one, um, there's a lot of people that are asking questions about shipping and this and that. As we expand the products, as we bring back the products that y'all are asking for and develop new ones, they ship from different locations. And last week, I sent an email out to all of the people that are Rapido customers to let them know, hey, we got a new Facebook page. Here's our YouTube. Go subscribe. That way, when we go live, you'll get notifications in case you forget, or if we have a special announcement and we go live for that or whatever. I got a lot of emails bounce back. So when y'all go in and place your orders, if y'all will put in the correct email address, hey, look, I'm not giving your email address to anybody. I just want you to get your shipping updates and notifications so you know exactly when your stuff is coming. I will say also that on at rapidoroosterusa.com, there the chat box, if you go in there and use the email that you put with your account and say track my order or something along those lines, it's going to find where your order is for you and it's going to let you know so you can get like fast information like that. But things are coming, things are moving. I actually have where the pellets. Hey, y'all wanted those pellets back a lot more than I ever dreamed. Jeff told me, he's like, hey man, they'd like to have the pellets. And I was like, okay, so let's make them, get the pellet machine, get everything dialed in and kick it off. And holy cow, we're out. So now, I got somebody back there making more as we speak so we can ship out the few orders. So that stuff's coming. Like when we brought back the red, it's going to be some, getting used to with the logistics of it. But hey, we're doing it. We're getting it back. Everything's working. And I'm excited about the ultimate exhibition conditioning feed. Before we actually get into breeding poultry tonight, Jeff, do you want to talk a minute about what went into creating that?
The 22 conditioning feed?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so the first round started with me and Douglas, 3.5, 4 years ago, maybe a little longer. And, so he told me what a game fowl person, what a person needs to get the bird, the nutritional requirements to get that bird the last 2 weeks, get him properly prepped. So,
right,
lower fat, lower fiber, because we don't want it hanging up in the gizzard and in the gut. But we've got 3 different kinds of protein going into that, not just one. And we're really specific on the amount of calories and energy in there. So the bird, we don't want them leaden up, right? We don't want them anything that's going to make them hold moisture, anything like that. So, besides that, it's got a bunch of whole grains in it, but it's on the lower fiber side because I still want that gizzard to be working. I want the gizzard to be hardworking all the way through, the 14 days leading up, right, to the show day. So that's pretty much what's in it. It's really a good looking feed but it's double the Rapido. So listen, right, if you're going to use the 22 show exhibition feed, don't feed Rapido. Don't use the oil and the Rapido. Okay, it's got a double dose of Rapido in it, right, to really peak that bird out. Give it the eye clarity, make it really alert. It's going to be a little bit nervous, so you need to make sure you're paying attention when you handle them. I don't want anybody coming back and saying they got spurred and they're bleeding, right? Don't send me pictures of that stuff. I don't want to see it. But it's gonna tune them up, right? So, and that's what it was made to do. Now when we made this round, we made a couple of small adjustments to it, but it's still got double the Rapido in it. Took a little bit more of the fiber out of it, because fiber will work against you. It'll lay in there in that gizzard and that gut, and it don't want to dump out the way you want it to. So, good stuff. I'm not going to put anything out that's bad.
Well, so. I know that. The reason I wanted to talk about it briefly is I want people to know that the vitamins, the minerals, everything is loaded and it's in there. If you look at the label, like we're in the process of getting the label done. If you don't read anything else on the label, on the right-hand side at the bottom where it's got the feeding instructions, do not, is in capital letters, add any other supplements. No B12, nothing.
Yeah.
It's in the bag.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want red cell. I don't want any B complex shots. I don't want any of that extra stuff because you just, you're going to overdose them, right? Everything that I put in there is going to take them right up to the edge, right up to the red line. So don't add anything else. Okay?
Now they would still use the jitter juice to calm the bird down and lower the bird's stress level, right?
They can. They don't. I don't really want them to. I want to save that for the last 2 days, right?
Yeah.
When we cut the feed back, right? When we cut the feed in half and we cut the feed back to a lower level, just to make sure they're dumping out good and they're cleaning out good, then that's when I want to give them a little jitter juice the night before, maybe the morning before, the night before, and the morning of, right? But don't get carried away, right? But I don't want anybody else's electrolytes and all that other crap going in there because it's just going to screw them up, right? If you got to do the other stuff, don't buy these pellets. Okay?
So tonight's show, we have a person that is one of my mentors personally, but a lot of people consider the man a breeding legend. And he laughs because he's a very humble person, but he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And to me, that's something. I mean, that says something. Rip, we've got Rip here. If you've been around poultry for a while, you've probably seen him at a show judging. I said it when the post over 40 years because I didn't want to tell everybody how young you were or anything like that.
Well, it's been a lot longer than that.
How long have you been judging?
Judging. I got my license in 1994.
Yeah.
But as far as having chickens, I got my first ones when I was 3. I got my first standard bred birds when I was 9. So a long time.
You were lucky enough to have standard bred birds at the time.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Saw the ad in Field and Stream for a guy over about 30 miles from me.
Yeah. I mean, that was back when you could buy 22 out of the Sears catalog.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me this, Rip. Why do you breed birds? Why do you breed them?
Well, I obviously have this passion for poultry, but I soon learned that what I really got a thrill out of was trying to breed birds to make them better this year than they were last year and keep making progress that way. Um, it's some folks are in it for the prizes, some folks are in it for the points. I'm just in it really for the breeding. That is what I get my most joy out of.
I mean, essentially, every year you're trying to outdo yourself.
Exactly. The way I look at it, I'm my own competition.
I mean, from a competitor standpoint, that's pretty awesome, in my opinion. You know, if you are your biggest competition, you know that says something.
Um, well, I'm not saying there wasn't a whole lot of people out there that bred better than I did, and because they are, and they did, but I'm just competing against me. If I can beat me next year better than I did this year, I'm happy.
Well, I mean, that motivates you to make smart decisions when doing what is very hard to a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
and that's
It is
culling.
hard.
It's hard. A lot of people, they don't want to cull their birds because they don't meet that next level standard. And if you're competing against yourself, you've got to be disciplined to make those decisions. You've got to know what you're looking for to be able to get your program to that next step.
Well, that's exactly right. And I have what I call my rule of 10, and I think you've heard me talk about it before.
Mm-hmm.
For every 10 birds you raise, you're going to get one that's good enough to keep. For every 100 birds, you're going to get 10 that's good enough to keep. That's literally how close you have to cull your flock if you're going to make progress. If you don't, you may make progress, but it's going to take you a lot longer. And if you cull your birds hard, the first 2 or 3 years, it becomes much easier to get good birds after that. And, breeding is really a long term project. It's something, it's a journey that you never get to the end of the road on. And it's a lot like an old country road. Country roads, they got twists and turns and ups and downs. And that's just like poultry breeding. Same way. Because, traits like body type, feather color, egg production, disease resistance are influenced by multiple genes. And to me, the main goal about breeding is to eliminate the qualities I don't want and intensify the qualities I do want to keep in my birds. And that takes a lot of effort.
That is important. With that in mind, that brings up my next question. Are goals important? To me, that should be a no-brainer, but tell us why those goals are important, or knowing where you're going.
Well, your goals are what keep you on track. It's where you want to go with your program. What do you want your birds to be? Do you want to win prize after prize after prize? Do you want to just produce better birds? Do you want birds that look better, perform better, whatever? And the goal will keep you on track to get that end product. So yeah, goals are really important. It's just like goals in life. If you don't have any goals in your life, you're going to kind of be puttering around out there and not winding up anywhere.
I remember shortly after we first met, you asked me what my goals were. And I thought about some things, and you were like, no, write them down. And I was kind of taken back. I was like, well, I mean, I know I want my bird, da, 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 da. And you said, write it down. Because if you write it down, you'll stick to it. And I still have that steno notepad where I started writing my goals, what I wanted for this bird, what I wanted to make better about it, what needed to be improved. And we've had conversations about culling and pairing and that kind of thing to help breed some of the stuff out to clean them up even better.
Exactly. Goals are long-term things. They're much different than plans. Goals never change. They are a constant.
Right.
Plans can change based on whatever's happening. There's an old saying: you set your goals in concrete and your plans in sand.
I mean, your plans can change based on what your wife tells you you're having for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
But that makes sense. I mean, you set your goals in concrete. You know, we were probably, I would say, a year in, and you told me we started talking about Culling because I finally got to the point where I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to do it. Even though this bird's cute, and I think might be, you said no, there's no might be. If the bird either is or it is not. And if it doesn't have the traits you're looking for, they're not just going to pop up out of nowhere. And you told me that when you have your first cull session straight out of the hatcher.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why? How do you know? What do you look for? So with that, I want to ask the question, how much emphasis do you place on body capacity?
Well, body capacity basically refers to the inside of the chicken that houses all the organs, the gizzard, the heart, the lungs, the intestinal tract, the whole 9 yards. And if you don't have good body capacity and they're undersized, all those organs are just kind of crammed in there and they cannot and will not work efficiently. So you need to make room. And you talked about me culling chicks out of the hatcher. What I look for is how wide is their head. Okay. If I look down on the top of a chick's head and I can see an eye or any part of the eyeball, they're not going to be wide enough. I don't want to see any eye because as the head goes, as a general rule, so goes the rest of the body. Save yourself a lot of feed that way. Some people said, well, what'd you do? Kill them? I said, no. I had a deal worked out with my feed dealer. I'd take them down there and trade them to him for chicken feed.
I had the deal worked out with my feed dealer. I mean, hey, that's actually a really good thing. One man's trash is another man's treasure. It's been around forever. And if you just want something pretty running around the yard, then
or hens to lay eggs, they don't have to look pretty. They don't have to be perfect. Which, by the way, there's no such thing as a perfect chicken, but they just got to be serviceable. Well, my birds were that, but for me, I wanted the best I had.
I mean, that makes sense. And if you want to, I mean, ever since you taught me that, I've been doing that. And we were talking a while back about, I mean, I raise a lot of quail for different purposes. And one of my projects I've got that I've told you about is getting a 1 pound plus quail. And you told me to apply that same cull method.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I've got this 2 brooders set up, one here. And I've done it for a long time. I'll take my culls and throw them over here and put a post on Facebook, blah, 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 chicks for sale. Works great. And I am noticing that with that first set of birds that I've done that with, it even works on quail. So
sure,
that body capacity, you told me a long time ago that has to do with everything. That tells you how the bird's going to convert feed to make it efficient, the whole 9 yards.
Fertility, production, everything. It's all related to body capacity. Jeff, I can tell, is jumping up and down over there, although you don't see him moving. Jeff, do you have a question or two?
I do. So, other than looking down on their head when they come out of the hatcher, what other defects might you see? Straight out
You
of the
might.
hatcher that you're going to say you're not. You're not staying.
Well, I look for the width of the head, but then I look for physical deformities, crossbeak, things that I know that are not going to correct themselves. I guess
Now,
I'm
is
being
that too early
hard-hearted.
to? Well, that's fine, but I mean, you don't see like duck toe that early, or
You can.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
You can.
So that's what I was wondering is what should the guys be looking for, right out of the hatcher, right?
I would
In the
look
first
for
24 hours.
obvious defects. Beaks. Are the eyes okay? You don't have one eye bulging and the other one's not. Uh, leg deformities. Uh, over 24 hours, are they moving around right? Are they vigorous? It's a good time to
But
evaluate
you're
vigor.
looking at, so you can already see body balance, so to speak, like they walk right, legs are
Mm-hmm.
right, toes are pointed in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that you can see, as soon as they come out of the hatcher, right?
Right.
And if they even give you a half a inclination that they don't need to stay, they don't stay, right? I mean,
No, they do
the
not.
longer you keep them, the more you have invested in them, and
It costs you money.
yeah.
And good grief, raising chickens is expensive enough.
So, at what point do you? I mean, I'm guessing that you're culling every time you go to the brooder. If you see something, every time you lay eyes on them, you're always evaluating the quality of that chick, right? And the way it's
You
acting.
You got to.
Right.
And it's a good habit to get into, even with chicks. It's a good habit to get into because that's something that will carry through as you raise those birds. If you're always watching what's going on, observing the birds, you're going to pick up on little things that are not right that disqualifies that bird from sticking around.
I wonder if the
And
local
see, that
feed
was
store wants to put. I wonder if the local feed store wants to put game fowl in their brooders. I don't
There's
know if
some around
people
here
know
that
what they're
carry them.
getting into.
I was
There's
going to
some.
say
Wouldn't
there's
surprise me.
the feed store that I have here. They typically will have one. They use when they start chick season, they'll have one of the probably 200-gallon water troughs, and it'll have your reds, silkies, Wyandottes, Orpingtons, whatever they can get, and depending on who's working there, you may get what you asked for if you don't know. And then they'll have different games as well. It was shocking to me because typically you got to go to somebody's yard to get a game bird. But they are, as people show game birds more, they're getting more and more popular. It's not just the cute little modern game table dancers. It's the A seals, the grays, and I know that those are all more color and not the official name, which Rip, I know and me calling a gray is you just want to say what it really is, and by all means,
No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
But I see more and more of them at shows. And so
you do.
it's progress.
Now, folks may not know, but I live down here in the South of the United States, and gosh, games are really popular down here. And I could go into a lot of shows. You didn't see a lot of birds, a lot of game fowl, but it was not too unusual to come across 10 or 15 or 20 or 25 in some shows. I thought it was great.
Even at the Fort Payne show that I went to, I think it was a little before Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
There was a couple of rows, and I walked in. I saw this. I was like, man, yeah, we got a game fowl at a regular show. We're moving up.
No, Kerry, some shows have game fowl classes.
Yeah.
The Bluebonnet Classic out in Texas. They
Mm-hmm.
have a huge game show.
That's awesome.
So
Jeff, did you have any more
at what
questions?
age are you? Yeah. So when you make like your next really like hard call, is it like 8 weeks? So different breeders that I talk to, you know, they'll sit down like they set aside a date at either 8 weeks or 12 weeks when they're going to make that next really hard, call line, and thin out, by depending on the breed, I realize, but somewhere in there, you're going to start because now the tail's forming, the hard feathers are coming in, right? Or the mature feathers are starting to come in. You're going to see a lot more attributes at that point, So were you an 8 weeker, 12 weeker?
I split the difference. I did my next really hard cull at 10 weeks
Okay.
because what I found overall with most all breeds, there's going to be some outliers, but what you see body wise, body capacity, length, depth of the whole 9 yards, what you see at 10 weeks is usually going to transfer to what you see at 20 weeks.
Right. I agree. And
Okay.
now, most games, since I've been working with the game file people, right? Um, we're rapidly approaching. It's not maturity, but it's that you're damn near to maturity. Okay, at that 24 weeks, right? Because you can start seeing an egg anytime. They're only a 4 to 5 pound bird. So it's not like some of the other breeds that weigh 10, 12 pounds that you need, closer to a full year to really. I'm not saying they're full grown, but I'm saying they're at a, they're pretty much at a point, like body capacity, framing, things like that are pretty much done. Right. So yeah, I don't know. I just don't know how much, I talk to a lot of these guys, or chat with them on a regular basis, and they're keeping birds well past that 6 month mark, thinking, oh, well, it might change. He might get better. Maybe if I give him a year, he's going to be better. And I'm thinking, buddy, you got another 25 pounds or 30 pounds of feed in him to wait that next 6 months, right? You just put another $20 plus your time and the space on your yard. So, I mean, you're basically throwing a $50 bill away, right? To wait that next 6 months and hope. So,
My
What are the
grandfather,
chances of that?
well,
huh?
not very much. My grandfather had a saying that if ifs and buts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. But usually when you're hanging on them, I had to have a darn good reason to keep a bird. If I had a question about, he better be really good for me to hang on to one after that 20-week mark.
I like what Billy says. Always look for a reason to cull.
Absolutely.
And I've gotten to, the last couple of years, I've gotten to where I do that. And I spent a lot of time out in my yard this past weekend, and I moved a bunch of my birds around, and I can really, it's me. And obviously I am pretty partial, but
That's normal.
I see a noticeable difference in birds on my yard. I look, I sat at one point and looked at a bunch of pictures that I had taken a couple years ago and compared the ones that I had of the same type 3 years ago versus now what I saw in front of me in the pen, and it's different. And, Dwayne brings this up, and to me, this is one of the biggest problems that game farm people have. He says a lot of game farm people only let the predators do the culling, And he says the fire barrel ain't in my yard just for feed bags.
You know, and somebody kept questioning me one time about culling. And, what do you look for? I said, maybe a better way to think about it is when you're watching your birds, look for a reason to keep them. Think about that one for a little bit.
Yeah.
If they don't show you a good reason to keep them, adios down the road.
So, Rip, when you were judging walking the pens at these big shows, did you do, I know you're more in the Rhode Island Red and the large fowl. Did you judge any of the games in any of these shows?
Oh, yeah. Well, I was a licensed, APA general judge. So I, first off, had to be capable of judging anything in the standard. And if you couldn't, you didn't get very many judging establishments or judging jobs.
Right.
So
yeah, you've got to know.
So what were you looking for? I mean, just kind of sum it up for these guys, as best you can remember.
Show,
it's been a while. Yeah.
First thing I look for is type or body shape or conformation, whichever way you want to look at it. Each breed has its own very distinctive type. Okay. The next thing I look for is color. You can have a breed, but they can come in multiple color varieties, and they can also come in comb varieties and that sort of thing. But look for type first, color next, and last, I look for condition. Those are the three things. And most, not most, but if you go by the APA standard, they assign point values to each section of the bird: the comb, the eyes, the earlobe, right on down to the toenails. And you've got to take all those things into consideration.
I had, don't judge me for this. I have a friend out in California that shot me a text message. It said, call the first one that goes on the roost at night and the last one off the roost in the morning.
That's probably pretty good advice.
There's
another thing. Go ahead.
It's oftentimes the same bird. When I had birds here, and I noticed it was a lot of times the first one on was the last one off. And so
he also said to watch for the first one off the roost in the morning. Put that one in the brood pen.
I can agree with that.
So we talked about goals, figuring out what your goals are, the importance of the body capacity, and how you can break down a lot of that straight out of the hatcher. When you have your goals and you know what you need to change, how many things can you change, or what should you work on each year?
I can tell you what not to do.
Okay.
When I was getting started, I thought, okay, I need to work on. I'd come up with a list of 10 or 12 things to try to correct.
Right.
Bad decision. Pick your battles. It will drive you crazy if you try to change more than one or two things at a time.
So for me, I would think that if you have a lot of things that you need to change, get a copy of the standard and get a copy of what the judge is looking for, and start with the one that's the most points.
Yeah. Most of the points, about 70% of the points, a bird gets 100 points, and about 70% of those are type or body shape. And then the next biggest percentage is color. And then the final percentage, which is condition.
Okay, so with that, if you have a bird that's body type's not right, how do you fix it?
Well, you got to take it one section at a time. Is the back too short? A lot of breeds, when the back is too short, the tail angle is too high. So you want to work on lengthening that back.
Mm-hmm.
Do they look kind of like a pencil, or do they have no body depth to them? Well, you got to work on increasing the body depth. Leg width. Leg width is another one. And easiest way to check whether you've got good width or particularly good leg width is to look at them from the rear end. If you have birds that are clamping their tails together like that when they should be more like that, the bird's too narrow.
Well, I mean, me and Jeff talk all the time about flipping your bucket over and watching them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I highly recommend it.
Dwayne's
People ain't
asked
got time for
question.
that.
Well, then they shouldn't have birds.
Yep.
Dwayne says, what do you think about a bird that has different leg color, like a green leg, a yellow leg on the same bird? He sees it a lot, and I've seen it in some messed up gene bird game fowl, but you don't really see it a whole lot in layers.
No.
What do you think about that? How?
It's a genetic thing. Green legs are caused from, excuse me, melanin deposits on a yellow-skinned bird. That's what makes green. If you took away the melanin deposit, they'd have all the yellow legs. White legs, that's absence of all color pigment.
And you're not going to give a bird yellow legs by feeding it too much corn, are you?
You can intensify it.
Yeah.
But you can't. If it's not there, feeding is not going to put it in there for you magically.
The only thing you can do in feeding is help that bird reach its genetic potential. You can't change its genetics, right?
Right. And feeding will not change. I heard somebody say, well, when I switched to this better feed, I started having this problem and this problem and this problem. I'm going back. I said, that's wrong. You always had that problem. It was just a poor quality feed that didn't allow it to express itself.
You just saw it. Yeah.
I love those conversations, Rip. I love those conversations.
Well, I can get on my high horse sometimes. I apologize.
I mean, I hate telling people you're feeding garbage, but it really bugs me because there's a lot of people, they have so many birds that they've got to buy the cheapest feed and then they hope for a miracle. And truth of the matter is that, like what we were talking about earlier, if they'd cull to improve their program instead of doing like what Dwayne said and let the predators cull their birds, that it would be better.
Feeding a good quality feed or poor quality feed, it's sort of like that GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. You keep putting garbage in them, you're not going to get very much out of them.
Well, and Jeff told me that, again, a couple of years ago, not long after we met, because in case nobody's noticed, he can be a little blunt. But
not me.
I appreciate that. And he said, if you won't eat the shit, why you expect your birds to eat it?
Yeah.
And I was like, because I told him about a feed that I had found locally that looked good, but you could set it on fire. And I'm sorry, but feed should not be flammable.
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
And when he said that, I smelt it and I didn't want to eat it. And at the time I didn't have pigs. So I had a few 100 pounds of it. I took it to a buddy of mine. I was like, here, feed this to your pigs. And he's like, what's wrong with that? That's good chicken feed. I said, no, it's not. Smell of it. Do you want to eat it? He was like, no, it doesn't smell good. I said, and you can set it on fire too. So If I'm going to be eating my chickens, I'm not going to feed them something that I wouldn't eat.
And, I know you guys talk about the importance of nutrition. I talk about the importance of nutrition, but it is so important that you're feeding good, high quality nutrition to your breeder birds. Because if they're not taking in the amino acids, the vitamins, and the minerals, all those things that are important, you're not going to get eggs that hatch well. They're not going to hatch strong chicks. The chicks are going to be suffering from things like failure to thrive. And it could all be corrected with just spending $3 or $4 more for a bag of feed, or using supplements.
The failure to thrive thing. So you know how in the winter months, a lot of times birds they'll get down out of the wind, especially like if they're in a fly pen that has solid around the bottom and holes up at the top. If they have half a brain, they're going to get down there to get out of the wind when it's whatever 10 degrees and the wind's blowing. Well, we've had several weeks of that here. And, I got a couple of my fly pens that have some brood fowl in it. And I just thought, they made them a spot in the ground and got warm. And I've got some chicks now that are 5 weeks old. Haven't lost any of the ones that hatched. And they've been outside in teens in the wind because I didn't wrap them in plastic or none of that. They had the metal around the bottom and that's it.
Yep.
And I can't help but think, man, that's more affirmation. You feed them, you breed them, and they have solid vigor, and I don't know, it works. Tell us in talking about all this crap, what is balance and why is finding that balance important other than for your sanity?
Balance is really another way to look is everything proportional. I forgot to plug my computer on. Hang on just a minute.
Why don't you do that? I'm gonna read this comment.
For example, is there more bird in front of the legs or behind the legs? And if you got one or the other, you better figure out what the problem is, because you got problems. And the best tool that I know of for determining balance is this, a pencil. You got a bird standing there or walking out on the yard, take that pencil, put it in line with his legs. Is there more body on this side of the pencil or on this side of the pencil? I saw a picture of an old English game bantam whose tail was literally bigger than the rest of the bird. And the guy could not believe I did not pick that bird for champion. He said, but it's flashy. I said, you can't eat flashy. Flashy does you no good.
You're right.
And you want to go the same thing horizontal. Hold your pencil up there in line with the breast and the vent. Is there more bird up here or down here? That's balance.
That goes with games, large fowl, any of them, right?
Yeah. Well, they all have their different shapes or type, and you kind of have to take that into consideration. But once you get your eye tuned into looking for this stuff, man, you can spot a good bird a mile away, and you can spot a bad bird about 1.5 miles away. So it's just a handy little trick that I picked up over the years.
Okay. What breeding system should I use?
Well, that really depends on what you're trying to do. If you have a bird that you're working with and you really want to increase that line, you want more, then I would use a flock breeding system where you use a male or more, depending on how well they get along, which with games is not all that well sometimes, but mated to a lot of females. That gives you the best genetic diversity to work with. If you want to make improvements on your birds, remember to do that, we got to not only accentuate the positive aspects of that bird, but we also have to remove the negative aspects. All right. The smaller the matings you can do, the better progress you'll make. And that's called line breeding. And you keep following that same through. Daughters to fathers, sons to mothers. Um, it's kind of like inbreeding, but it's not real tight inbreeding, because inbreeding is um, where you're mating closely related birds, like brothers and sisters. And that's another tool that you can use. And most people, well, they have a panic attack when I say, okay, breed brothers and sisters, because that will show you really quick where your faults are and where your pluses are.
I'm not gonna lie. There's sometimes if I'm bored and I'm on Facebook and I'm in a chicken group, the people see the BYC. Y'all know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put a comment like that and just sit back and with some popcorn, because it people get all crazy about it.
You would qualify as a professional pot stirrer.
I actually have been referred to as a rabble rouser a time or two. But I mean, the entertainment factor.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah. Question for you.
Yeah.
In APA standards, is squirrel tail a deduction or a DQ?
It's a disqualification. And in case the listeners don't know what squirrel tail is, it is when you got the bird's back and you got the tail here, usually at a lower angle, but when it comes forward or it tilts toward the head, it gets above or past the vertical.
Mm-hmm.
It's a disqualification.
Okay.
And that's because what I was talking about earlier. That's come from a short back. Which affects body capacity.
Okay. So, that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that body capacity really plays a huge role
in everything.
In all of it. And so the person that asked that question is a friend of ours, Dwayne Ard. He's actually the vice president of South Carolina Game Breeders Association. Or
Dwayne, glad to hear from you, bud. Thanks.
North Carolina. And he is a licensed judge, but he was wanting to find out if it was the same in both standards, because it's one of the things that we talk about from time to time when he and I have conversations is we'll compare the two standards, and they're there.
Carrying another thing while we're on this tail business, if you find a bird that holds its tail flat or almost flat, their back's going to be too long, which also affects body capacity. It stretches it out, but you need body capacity is length, depth, and width. I'm sorry. Okay. I'll get off my high horse. Go ahead.
No, I mean, no, this is all stuff like people ask so much. That's why I wanted to have you on the show. We want to know.
That's why I started my Facebook, Poultry Keepers 360, because you cannot believe all the crappy chickens I bred when I was coming up. It was unbelievable. I'm almost afraid to tell you, but it takes a lot of work. Back then, if you found out some information, you either had to call somebody, you had to write them a letter, or you had to talk to them in person. The internet had not even been thought of, much less invented at that point. The internet has made it so much better. It's a blessing and it's a curse. because it's just like anything else that gets done in the internet. If you've got a lot of folks getting excited about it and posting about it, you get a lot of bad information to go with the good information. And you just have to work on trying to root out the bad stuff and pitch it out the window and keep the good stuff.
So, in effort to stir the pot, there's this question that I got to ask, and I love seeing this question because it gets me too. What's the best way to introduce new blood to your flock?
Oh boy, the best way is don't do it. Not to give you a short
Amen.
answer.
I mean, it's like starting all over.
It's like taking a bowl of marbles, bowl of red marbles. That's the genetics on the line you got. And you weeded out all the other colors and you got them pure and they look great. But because they're not working to keep up things like vigor, that slips away from you. You got to, vigor is really important. You got to work on that. You got to work on that. And then you got another bird, you go to Joe Blow on the other side of the country and you get a male. Okay. You bring him in and he's been line bred and all his genes are yellow marbles. When you combine those marbles, they're just all jumbled up. That's the same thing with the genetics. And just like it takes you a while to sort out those marbles after you mix them up, it's going to take you a while to straighten out your birds after you mix it up. Guaranteed. Been there, done that, and I don't want to go through it again. If you're going to introduce new blood, do this. If and I'm going to go back to Rhode Island Reds, not picking on game talk about not doing that, but I got more experience there. I got my Reds from E.W. Reese in Thompson, Georgia. Okay. When I got to the point that I thought that I needed new blood, I went back to Mr. Reese and got more birds from him. They're related to what I have, but they're not closely related to what I have. It gives you that same effect of an outcross without actually making a true outcross. Becomes a strain cross at that point.
So basically what you did was whatever trait you were trying to fix that year, because earlier you said you should only work on one or two.
Right.
Whatever trait you were working on, obviously you went a year or two and you couldn't fix it.
Right.
So you went back to where you got your foundation flock from to get a bird that did not have what you were trying to get rid of or was what you were trying to fix, however you want to look at it, and brought that back so you weren't essentially starting all over.
Exactly. And I'll tell the viewers another little secret that my mentor told me is that he kept a pen of birds that all looked like you would never want to use them in a breeding pen. And I asked him about them one day. I said, Mr. Reese, none of these birds ever, they don't really match up or anything like that. And he said, those are my part birds. We sat there and he went right through him. He said, if I want improved body length, I'd use that bird over there. If I want to improve depth of color, I'd use that female over there. And if you can afford to do it and you've got the room to do it, it takes some facilities, but do it because you're keeping your own kind of little repair shop going on the side that you can use those birds to correct problems.
If you have birds that have a lot of good quality, so they're not culls, but they're not perfect, you stick them off by themselves, and when you need a spare part, you got one. I mean, that makes sense.
It takes a strong person to do that, though, and here's why. Because if you wind up with a pen of females here and a pen of males here that are your parts birds, sooner or later you're going to face a temptation of breeding those birds when you don't really need to, and that can cause you more problems than it solves.
Yeah, I can see that too. tell me this. We're almost out of time,
Yes, sir.
but I want to know how important is nutrition for breeders? What should people look for? Why does it matter? Et cetera, et cetera. I know you briefly touched on it before, but I want to specifically ask that loaded question and let everybody hear what you have to say.
You're asking me to bare my brains here in front of the two best people I know of on poultry nutrition. But it goes back to what I said earlier. It's kind of garbage in, garbage out. If you're not getting the nutrition in your birds, you're never going to be a success with them. I learned that from that fellow sitting in that high back chair right there, from Jeff Maddox. And once I started applying what he taught me, my birds became much better, much faster. And it's all nothing in the world but nutrition. I had better bodies, I had better feathers, I had better feather quality, better feather color, just better birds all the way around. The boy knows what he's talking about.
How many times can you breed in before you have to breed out? Or is that even a thing? Because I've always been told, which, I have a line of birds that has been correctly line bred for 70 or 80 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
So
now wait. Frank said line breed.
right.
Autocorrect
Well,
kind of messed it up.
I knew what he was talking about.
Yeah.
How many
Line
times
breeding.
can you do that before, or do you have to if you do it correctly?
Kerry, I know the line of birds you're talking about. I have them too. That line of bred birds trace back to the founder of the breed, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But they have been line bred using the same system for 90 years. And the way we do that is, and never had to bring in any outside blood. The way that's done is you start with related females, full sisters. Okay. Start with 4 full sisters. Break them into 2 trios. Get a male that's unrelated to them to head up each pen. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Over the years, if we call those pen 1 and pen 2. Over the years, you're going to produce birds. Hey, I want to breed from this bird. But if you have a female from pen 1, it only can go back into pen 1. If you have a female that come out of pen 2, she can only go into pen 2. What that does, that builds remarkable uniformity in your birds. And because you're crossing the males around and not the females, you're keeping those family lines basically pure.
Yeah.
Right? It sounds a little complicated, and once I tried it, I saw what I had been missing all this time.
I mean, I can say that the birds that I hatched out, and I've hatched probably every egg that trio has popped out, at least 80% of them. And of that, I've had a couple of birds that, but the uniformity, I mean, I could take a hen and hold her by the mom, and they almost look like twins.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's the way it should be.
Some people, at some point it's spiral mating, or is
Spiral
it
mating, clan mating. I call it family line breeding.
Yeah, but when they're all the same, it's kind of the same.
Lewis, if you will contact me, send me a message on Facebook Messenger. I've got an article that I wrote about that. I'll be happy to share it with you. He's wanting to know where he can find that system written down. Um,
Well,
Actually,
they're already
if you
asking.
don't mind,
They're always
we share that in on the Rapido Facebook page.
sure, no secret. I'm easy to
they're
find.
already Rip. They're already asking for you to come back. So might as well plan on
Boy,
it.
they are gluttons for punishment, aren't they?
So
They don't get to hear this anywhere else, right?
let's do this. Most of the questions that I see in the comments, and that there's a lot of people that send me Facebook messages and text messages because they don't want to be in the public eye.
Oh, I
Totally
same thing here.
understand it. That's why I read them off.
Yeah.
They want to know about how to properly do this breeding. So maybe in a few weeks, month, whatever, something, you could come back on the show and we could do a presentation specifically on breeding
I'd be happy to.
and how to properly do that line breeding, because quite a few of the people I have had the chance to meet personally and actually hold their birds, and they have some great birds, and they want to properly continue that bloodline.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do a show. Let's do a show and give it to them.
I'm happy to do that. Before we go, and I know we're running time, I got two more things I want to say. Somebody was asking about line breeding, and somebody else asked about how long can you inbreed. Back when I had my Rhode Island Red Bantams, they kept getting too big. So I finally, out of one hatch, I had about 4 or 5 that were nice, small, typey birds. So I picked the best male and the best female. Full brothers, full sisters, mated them together. Now, if you talk to most anybody about inbreeding, they have a panic attack. But folks, breeding poultry is not the same as breeding other livestock. The genetics don't work the same. I did full brothers and sister mating for 7 years in a row. I could have probably gone a little longer, but by 7 years, I had the size down where I wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
But no, now I'll be happy to come back anytime you want me to.
All right.
Yeah, well, it's probably going to get pretty regular, Rip. So just hang on.
That's fine.
So
yeah,
just know that I'm old and I keep forgetting what I said before, so I'm apt to repeat myself some. But it's all good stuff.
That's right. Hey, it's definitely good stuff and definitely great company. With that said, we're 5 minutes over, so I'm going to tell you everybody out there good night. And I've already laid out next week's show. It's going to be pretty interesting. So we'll see y'all next week. Until then, see us in the comment section.